Hey everybody, video here for you today. This is going to be a little easier one for me to put together. Going to get a little help at the end here. We're going to go down, document another ancient America site. This is Casa Grande in Arizona, just southeast of Phoenix. This is where the ruins are today, right down here. Big ruin, a great house, the ruins of that right underneath this roof here. And what else is here? Right down here, there's an ancient BallCourt right here. You can see the remains of it today. We'll hear a little bit more on that. And then right here, there is a clear four-sided pyramid mound here. You can see the corners, square top right there. Here is the great house, how Casa Grande got its name, what is left of the structure here. Here is the BallCourt right here, all covered up by centuries of sediments here. And right over here, you can see in the distance is that pyramid mound, clear four-sided pyramid mound, just sitting there, right out there. There seems to be a progression of building here. The pyramid, one of those built before the other. Some of these structures, maybe 800 years ago. The great house, maybe 700 years ago. I think that's the way I am understanding this. But here is a look. The ruins today. You get a little perspective there. Those of you who have followed me for a long time know I like documenting all these ancient places in America. I like being thorough. No place is not important enough to share on my channel here. Here is an artist's conception of what Casa Grande may have looked like about 700 years ago. It says archaeologists discovered evidence that the ancestral Sonoran Desert people who built the Casa Grande also developed wide-scale irrigation farming and extensive trade connections, which lasted over 1,000 years until about 1500. Just reading about the place, there appears to be a history before these structures were built, maybe 900 years ago, 1,000 years ago. But the place seemed to be thriving about 800, 700 years ago. And then it says Casa Grande was abandoned around 1450 of the current era, since the ancestral Sonoran Desert people who built it left no written language behind. Written historic accounts of Casa Grande begin with the journal entries of Padre Eusebio Francisco Kino when he visited the ruins in 1694. In his description of the large ancient structure before him, he wrote the words Casa Grande, or Great House, which are still used today. And here are some more people who visited the site in the 1800s. Here's a page from a book, a couple people that worked at the site in the early 1900s. The roof was put on in 1903 originally. And there at the bottom, an old pic from, I think, about 95 years ago. Here's a pic from 140 years ago, west side of Casa Grande. Maybe an entrance down there. Maybe a window or an observation place right there. Here's a pic of the ruins coming from 1900. What these must have looked like in their original form. That's only for the imagination, I guess. Here's that area we just looked at today. Doorway or opening right there. Here's a look from inside. Plaster was put on the inside and outside. You can clearly see these ruins from overhead. Get a lot better perspective of them probably than from ground level, looking at them from a distance. There are other things in this area that you can clearly make out under the sands of the desert here, but that BallCourt, clearly evident right there. Here's another look at the BallCourt, but what I'm going to do right now is play about a 9-minute clip from Archaeology Southwest. They uploaded a video very recently about this place and almost an hour lecture. I'm going to share about 9-10 minutes of it. Here you go.
Okay, so let's start with just why is this place special? Well, for me, it really is a sanctuary. It's a place you can really feel a connection with the past, and it's also a preserve. I mean, not just for the archaeological resources, but also natural resources with wildlife and plants and vegetation. Again, the centerpiece is the Casa Grande. It was built in the early 1300s, and it still remains a significant historical and cultural landmark. I'll talk a little more about how this parcel was originally set aside in 1892 as the nation's first archaeological reserve, which is also pretty remarkable. And then later it became a monument and part of the Park Service in 1918. In addition, for Native American tribes, including the Akimel O'odham and the Tohono O'odham and other descendant Native American tribes that have affiliation with this site, such as Hopi and Zuni, it is a sacred place with deep spiritual meaning. And it figures prominently in traditional oral histories of these tribes as well. So what is important about Casa Grande Ruins, the monument? So I'm going to focus first on these central areas here, which really seem to form a central precinct. This core group of ruins really appear to be the focus of life, both ceremonial life, ritual life, as well as other kinds of social activities in the monument. So this core included the Casa Grande and Compound A down here, a large area here, which we believe was a plaza, which is an open area for people to use and do various activities. This BallCourt, which you saw a photo of, or you're going to see some more of, and these other compounds here, which actually have 2 platform mounds inside Compound B. And you'll see a little bit about that too. So this inner ring of the central core was surrounded by another ring of settlements and residences that formed the Casa Grande village. So, historical background of visitors to this site over the years. Since the O'odham didn't have a written language, the first written documents were from Spanish missionaries and military people for the most part. Padre Eusebio Francisco Kino was the first European to visit Casa Grande in 1694. This map is drawn by him in 1695-96 and based on his 1694 travels. And of course, the circle there shows where Casa Grande is. You can see it's actually got a separate little icon. So this was actually a really important place and an important stop along these travels for all the Spaniards who came through this part of Arizona. He actually described the Casa Grande and called it the first one to use the words Casa Grande, so it's still used today. He then returned 3 more times with Captain Monje, and he was the one who actually drew the first sketch of the ruin and actually had a much more detailed description than Kino. Kino wasn't really as detailed, and Monje did actually some nice recordings. So he was the first person to sketch this. And again, thereafter, pretty much every expedition that traveled through this part of Arizona would stop or go by Casa Grande. And more became known about the ruin with later Spanish visitors such as Juan Bautista de Anza and the friar Father Font, who was with him, and he said Mass at Casa Grande, spoke with some of the elders and recorded some of these stories even in 1775. Now, the Spanish accounts routinely indicate that Casa Grande was built by the Aztecs from Mexico, and they routinely call it a Casa de Montezuma, which we now know, of course, is not true, but this is what the Spaniards thought. They didn't really feel like the people that they were encountering could have produced these great villages and great structures that they were seeing. The building was designed as a whole unit and required tons of material, and they likely built it in one coordinated episode. Walls were made with caliche, and it's called the English cob process, which is actually, they did not use forms to build these walls. They just used very stiff mud made of caliche to build these walls up by hand. It's a remarkable feat. It's quite incredible, but they did not use forms to build these walls. They're 3 to 5 thick at the base, 2 feet thick at the top, and they were plastered. So this was actually, didn't look like this before, but they would be plastered and basically painted with a colored clay. So these buildings were probably painted a reddish color. And the beams for this are really unique because you almost never see this in any other Ho'okam architecture where you have pine, fir, and juniper being used from as far as 50 miles away here in the Catalinas. So the photograph here of this BallCourt, as you can see, is an elliptical or oval-shaped earthen embankment surrounded feature. And when you actually do an excavation, you find that there are plastered and prepared surfaces inside of this feature. And I'll talk a little more about that in a moment. And then later in the Classic period, these were replaced by another form of architecture called platform mounds. So the Ho'okam are also noted especially for their construction of hundreds of miles of canals with numerous systems in the Phoenix Basin that irrigated thousands of acres. And so this map is a snapshot showing in the Phoenix Basin, so along the Gila River, which is where Casa Grande is to the south here, and on the top there in the lower Salt River around Phoenix. These are a snapshot of all the canal systems that we are aware of that were used in this time period of this millennium. Their primary crops, and by the way, these systems in the Phoenix Basin are also the most extensive canal irrigation systems that are known in the pre-Hispanic Americas north of Peru, so even dwarfing what is found in Mexico. So one of the main stories is their creation story about their history. And I won't tell the whole story, but it basically describes a cycle of creation and destruction. It suggests that people were both moving in and out of territory as well as population levels fluctuating over time. They, in the end part of this story, their deity named Elder Brother, who was one who had helped create humanity, actually during the period of the platform mound villages when these leaders supposedly wanted to kill Elder Brother so they could acquire more power, in response, he actually brings back people from prior to a flood, which is part of this creation story, to attack and defeat the rulers of the platform mound villages along the Middle Gila and the Lower Salt. You can see in this photo here, although this is 1929, shows the roof that was installed originally in 1903, not the roof you see today. And then very shortly thereafter, in 1918, President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed Casa Grande Ruins to be a national monument, and it became part of the Park Service where it is now. So why was it built? The question everybody wants to know. Well, in a word, we don't know for sure. However, it's been variously thought to have been a domestic residence, a fortress, a temple, residence for rulers, a storage facility for surplus crops, astronomical observatory, an administrative center for irrigation management. We think that it almost certainly had multiple functions, but the indications are that there was clearly a specialized ceremonial structure as well as an observatory, and probably was a special residence for a chief or a priest, or both. So let's step back. We looked at Casa Grande, so let's step back and look a little bit wider. So here you can see Compound A on the top, where the Casa Grande is, and in between Compound B is the BallCourt. And Compound B here, which has two platform mounds, which I'm going to talk a little more about, which is another significant structure. So Compound B was actually built a little bit earlier. And this is a diagram on the right. And there are two, what Fuchs called pyramids. Pyramid B on the south side, Pyramid A on the north. And these are photographs on the left here, once they had been excavated in 1906-07.
So that is a bonus when Archaeology Southwest uploads a video on stuff you are looking at. I will leave the full link to that lecture below. They just uploaded it within the last few weeks. That is the Casa Grande Ruins. Coolidge is a city. It's nearby, Phoenix, Scottsdale area up there. Not too far away. That's a little ancient America. I'm going to be working on a few more videos today. I'll get at least one of them uploaded. Hope you thought that was cool, and you all have. Very safe day.